The Committee on Military Veterans and Homeland Security will come to order. Good afternoon, Mr. Clerk. Would you mind taking attendance?
Chair Lefebvre.
Here.
Representatives Beeler.
Here.
Eisen.
Here.
Bazat.
Here.
Martin. Jones.
Present.
Coleman.
Here.
Rogers.
Here.
Steenland.
Here.
Mr. Chair, quorum of the committee is present.
Vice Chair Jones makes a motion to approve the minutes of March 10th meeting. Are there any objections? Without objections, the meeting minutes are approved. We've got two bills we are going to hear testimony on today. Let's start with Representative Johnson on House Bill 4058.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee for the opportunity to testify on this today. I'm not really sure where to begin here. So, I mean, this is kind of touching on a federal issue, and obviously at the state, we'll state issues. But I think we actually do have not just the opportunity, but I think it's our duty to be involved in these matters. And this is what is referred to as the Defend the Guard Act. This is something that's not just in Michigan. This has actually been introduced in a number of states nationwide. Not just this term. We actually introduced it last term, so this isn't because there's a Democrat president. I mean, I introduced it when there was a Republican president. We've seen this in both Republican and Democrat states, so this is not a partisan issue. And basically it's just saying, what is the purpose of the National Guard? What is their role? And essentially what this legislation is saying is that unless Congress actually declares war, do the Article 1, Section 8 declaration of war, then we're not going to authorize National Guard troops to go to that war zone. Now, this isn't a pro or anti-war stance. This is a Congress should do their job and actually declare the war. If that's what they want to do, if that's where they believe troops should go, then they should declare war, which we have not done in decades. So that's really the point of this bill, is just saying if you're not going to declare war, then National Guard troops are going to serve their state. That is what their initial role was to do. If you are willing to declare war, then you can use those troops. It's a pretty basic thing of trying to actually ask Congress to just do their job. So that's what it is. This is not a partisan issue. I think in West Virginia it's been, I know they debated the issue there. The ACLU was in favor of it there. There's been, in Maine, American Legion had a resolution in favor of it there. I think the Republican Party of Texas had a resolution in favor of it. You're really seeing a number of different entities that are probably not aligned on a lot of different issues coming together on this one, and it's a nationwide thing. One of the pushbacks that we've heard is that if we do this, then they're going to try to cut federal funds from coming to our state, that the feds are going to try to punish us for not doing this. And I think if you think it from a practical standpoint, it's highly unlikely. Michigan is a key state politically. And I don't think there's any way that the president, whatever party, is going to refuse money for the military from coming to Michigan. I think it's political suicide to do that. So I really don't have any of those concerns, especially when you see the number of states that are pushing this. I think there is just kind of a growing call to say we need to be more purposeful about when and where we go to war and make sure that Congress is actually doing their job in declaring war if that's what they so choose to do. Not anti-pro-war, it's about Congress doing their job. So with that, I'll answer any questions.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Rogers has a question.
Thank you, Chair. So my question is, you talk about specifically Congress and this war declaration. When is the last time that Congress declared war?
I believe it's like World War II, if I'm correct. So, I mean, it's been a long time.
In
yes.
the 40s. And so are you saying that there has not been any other justification to include the National Guard in a national response in any of those other things that have arisen since 1942?
I'm saying if that's what Congress wants, if they believe that sending troops into a war zone, a place where there's people being killed, then they should actually do their job per the Constitution and declare war. Whether that's the Vietnam War or the Korean War, Afghanistan War or the Iraq War, I'm not here taking a position pro or anti. I'm saying Congress has passed the buck and refused to actually do their job and say we are actually going to declare war. And that's what we need to go back to, is them actually declaring war. And this is the National Guard. The National Guard, their purpose is from a state role first. Now, they've been federalized recently, I understand that, and this doesn't impact anything regarding humanitarian missions. But if you're going to go to the National Guard to send them to a foreign land to fight a war, the National Guard is supposed to be the very last resort, right? This isn't an imminent threat that they have to quick go and repel. That's what your traditional active duty military is there for. You're talking a longer term presence in a foreign land for a war. And whether we're going to be for or against that, I think Congress should actually have to vote on it so that we actually know where our elected representatives at the federal level, where they stand on that issue before they send our troops overseas.
If I may have a follow-up? Yes. So you just also mentioned it doesn't impact humanitarian missions, yet this bill is specifically saying without an act of Congress declaring war that the National Guard cannot be implemented. So that's counterintuitive to saying that they can't be used in a humanitarian mission.
It says they cannot be released from the state into active duty combat. Combat is not humanitarian.
Thank you.
Vice Chair Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative, good to see you.
Good to see you.
I was wondering, I know you said it's been introduced in some other states. Has it passed anywhere else?
I don't believe it's passed at this point, no.
Okay. You're trying to lead the way on this?
We always want to lead the way. So there's other states that I believe introduced it first. I know West Virginia has had hearings on it. I believe Idaho and Wyoming have as well.
Mm-hmm.
I don't believe anyone has actually passed out of both chambers, but it's always good for Michigan to be first.
I hear you. If I may? Just in the same vein of my colleague on the committee, so does this intend to prohibit any of the National Guard being called up for any kind of disasters under Title 10, like what we've just seen at the Capitol or whatnot?
This would not affect that. I believe also we have National Guard down at the southern border with Mexico. This would not affect that. That's not a active combat zone. This is going to be active combat. So you're thinking in this day and age, Afghanistan primarily.
Got you. And I know also part of the bill talks about like hazardous things and stuff. Is there any particular definition? What would define that?
Yeah. So there is the definition sections of what that means. And I think we pretty much are using model legislation. If you have amendments that you think you can better define what that should look like, we are very open to that. Definitions are incredibly important when you're talking about law. And so if you think there's a better way to define it, absolutely, I'm all ears.
Okay, definitely. Thank you.
Any other questions? Representative Eisen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This in no way affects what the National Guard does in the state of Michigan for our National Guard.
Correct.
Thank you.
Vice Chair Jones.
I know it probably doesn't affect what we do here in the state, but I know that the National Guard definitely partners with other states. So would this affect us going to another state for any kind of relief or assignment?
Only if that state was an active combat zone, which is not the case. So as long as they're not an active combat zone, you can still go and partner. If they're going to go down to Ohio and do a partner operation with them for training, they are absolutely still able to do that. Or if they had to go down, say into the Gulf after a hurricane and help out there, they would still be allowed to do that.
What constitutes an active combat zone? If you could define
that's
that
the
for us.
definition section on page 2. So that kind of defines what that is. Happy if you want to change that definition around. Absolutely happy to look at that.
Okay.
I don't see any more questions for the bill sponsor at this time. Representative, thank you for testifying today.
Thank you very much.
We have via Zoom Fred Scheibele from the Department of Military Veterans. Fred, can you hear me? Unmute yourself, sir.
Can you hear me?
Now we can. Thank you and welcome back.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, for the opportunity and to come in and testify. I wanted to express the department on behalf of Major General Paul Rogers, who's the Adjutant General of the Michigan National Guard. We are strongly opposed to this legislation. I think there was, to put it in as basic of sense, and we appreciate and respect what Representative Johnson's attempting to do. The National Guard and the military should never be used as a political instrumentality. And that's at first what we're seeing with this. There's a desire to use the Guard to initiate a debate on Congress's roles and responsibilities. That's not what we're here for with the National Guard. And so that first and foremost is the major concern that we have with the precedents that this bill sets. Secondly, and again, with all due respect to Representative Johnson, the bill as drafted, we do have concerns that it does impact our ability for ongoing missions that we currently support in the state. For example, the 110th Air Wing out of Battle Creek is actively engaged with the MQ-9 Reaper missions all across the world. as this bill is currently drafted, we would be prohibited from doing that because there's not a declaration of war. And that is considered active combat under the definition in the bill, as well as our KC-135 refueling missions that fly out of Selfridge and Alpena. The other thing to remember is while the National Guard originally was intended as that state militia back when the country was first founded, the evolution of the military structure in the United States has drastically changed in the last 50 years. And the National Guard has become a very active primary reserve component, the primary reserve component to our armed forces abroad. And so by limiting our ability to engage in that dual status mission, all National Guard members take an oath both to the state and to the federal government and serve in that dual capacity. Michigan would be removing itself from those missions. We would not receive the same level of investment, the force structure, if Michigan wasn't able to contribute to those ongoing missions would be removed. We could very well see Selfridge, Alpena, other installations close as a result of this bill being implemented. So, there isn't really at this point any language that we would see that would address any of these concerns because we just first and foremost fundamentally disagree with the Guard being used in this capacity to advance what we consider a much more political conversation. So with that, that's kind of where we're at. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Representative Coleman has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Shively. Thanks for being here today. We appreciate you joining us. If you could just kind of reiterate and clarify, you're saying that this bill would kind of move the National Guard into a political role or be used in a political way. My understanding is that Representative Johnson is just trying to make sure that we're following the Constitution and that Congress declares war. So if you could kind of clarify that for me. I could use a little more embellishment of your point there. Thank you.
Sure, Mr. Chair, through you. As I understand it, and again, we have not been advocating for this legislation as the Michigan National Guard. It wasn't anything that we've asked for. We didn't meet with Representative Johnson on this issue. And so we don't have all the background, but from what we can tell, this is a multi-state effort by an organization that's looking to hold Congress accountable per the Constitution through one interpretation of the Constitution. With that said, they're using the state's National Guards then as the instrumentality to achieve that. So the states, what they're attempting to do is prohibit the state's governors through their military acts from responding to and deploying what have been legitimate deployments in the past based on both federal statute and previous court rulings. It's putting the Guard in the position to be used as that widget, if you will, that pawn. I don't like to use the word pawn, but in this debate, there's no other way to really have that to really flex the muscle of the states, if you will, other than inserting and holding back the Guard from responding to these federal missions that we have responded to and have been activated under for largely the last 50 years. And there's case law going back to, I believe, the 1990s, where it was upheld that the states didn't have the ability to not respond to those federal requests because of the dual status that all National Guard members across the country serve in, which is both a state status. They take an oath to uphold the state National Guard and the state Constitution, as well as the federal National Guard as well.
Thank you, Mr. Shively. I thought I heard Representative Johnson mention that this has been brought forward in the past in our state. Is that how recently did that happen? And did it make it through committee? Was it brought to the floor? Did it pass the House? If you could help me out there. Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, through you, my understanding is Representative Johnson did introduce this legislation last year. I don't believe it received a committee hearing at that point, but I'd welcome any correction from any of the committee members or staff who could correct me on that.
Thank you.
Vice Chair Jones.
Mr. Child just nodded in approval. I don't think it was given a hearing.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Any more questions for Fred? Thank you very much, sir. Appreciate it. We have a couple more individuals wishing to testify on this bill. Tony DeMott, can you hear me from the Campaign for Liberty? Tony, are you available?
Yes. Can you hear me?
We can. Thank you for
Okay.
testifying.
Thank you. So my name is Tony DeMott. I am the president of Michigan Campaign for Liberty, a resident of Michigan and a veteran, as is my father and his father. So I come before you today to urge you to vote in support of HB 4058, the Defend the Guard Act. Our founders were very clear that the decision to send our young men and women into harm's way on foreign soils must not rest in the hands of one person. That decision carried such grave consequences that our sons and daughters, or for our sons and daughters, that it must be debated and put through a deliberative process. The Constitution takes the power to declare war out of the hands of the executive branch, whom James Madison called the branch of power most interested in war and most prone to it. So Article 1, Section 8, Clause 11 of the U.S. Constitution empowers Congress, and them alone, with the power to make war on another nation. Since World War II, Congress has been very content with avoiding accountability and surrendering their responsibility for making this decision to the executive branch. This is very convenient for all except the National Guard. Politicians in Washington get to avoid blame, and whenever questions claim to be an innocent bystander. Except for a small handful of senators and congressmen, very few on Capitol Hill seem to even care about the Constitution or their duty to our men and women in uniform. So Article 1, Section 8, Clause 15 of the U.S. Constitution, known as the Militia Clause, permits Congress to call forth the National Guard into federal service to execute the laws of the unions, suppress insurrections, and repel invasions. Now, in 1990, the Supreme Court did unanimously decide that National Guard units could be deployed overseas for training exercises without the consent of a state's governor. The justices wisely said nothing about active duty combat deployments, knowing that such an action only falls under Congress's purview to declare war. The purpose of the Defend the Guard Act is to require that politicians, if they want men and women of Michigan to give their lives on foreign soils, sign their name on the dotted line and pass a declaration of war. I would not argue that this is a political fight, such as the previous fellow had stated, but this is just simply the duty of Congress. And so when the flag draped coffins of someone's son, daughter, mother, or father come back to Michigan, it'll be easy for you to point to that swamp in DC and blame them. But the truth is, those who vote against this bill are going to be the true culprits. Should you vote against this bill or attempt to put up roadblocks to its passage, I will make it my purpose to let everybody in your district know that you are the one to blame. So thank you for your time, and I urge you to vote yes on the Defend the Guard Act, HB 4058.
Thank you very much, Tony. Are there any questions? Appreciate it, sir. We also have Dan McKnight wishing to testify. Can you
Hi,
hear
can you
us,
hear me?
Dan? We got you.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'll try and be brief, as many of the points I was going to make have already been brought up. My name is Dan McKnight. I was in the United States Marine Corps. Then I transferred to the United States Army in the 90s. And then I closed my service in the military out as a member of the National Guard, where I deployed to Afghanistan early in the war in 2005 through 2007. I was injured there, and I came home and left the service and kind of went dormant for about a decade until I got tired of seeing my National Guard brothers and sisters go back on their 6th or 7th or even 8th combat deployment in Afghanistan and Iraq. And we started an organization called Bring Our Troops Home with the effort to influence legislators and congressmen and senators to do what is right and properly debate war and then provide thoughtful civilian oversight of the military in matters of war, the way the Constitution outlined. We have members in our organization in all 50 states and 3 different territories. We've got members from the World War II, Korean War, Vietnam, all the way through Panama, Grenada, all the way through the global war on terror and all the conflicts since then. And our organization overwhelmingly supports this legislation, and we've helped push it and find sponsors for the bill in 31 different states, including Michigan for the 2nd year. This is something that's very near and dear to our hearts because we feel that if there is something that's so important that the United States military in general, and specifically the National Guard, should go and fight these wars overseas, that if it's so important, then we should do it the right way. We should have Congress debate and properly declare war as required by the Constitution and the enumerated powers, and ask them to put their name on the line before we put our boots on the ground. And the purpose for that is because when a declaration of war in Congress is made, it becomes the law of the Union. Things change. The state of the nation changes. We change the state of peace to a state of war. And when we do that, the sons and daughters of our states, the militia, our teachers, our policemen, our firefighters, our volunteer legislators, they put the uniform on and they go fight and defend our nation's interests. And that declaration of war is necessary. In 1941, it was the last time Congress actually declared war against Hungary, Bulgaria, and Romania. But it's important to remember that duty doesn't go away just because Congress doesn't do it. That duty is still there. That enumerated power is still there. The National Guard is and should be an auxiliary and reserve component of the active duty military. If a war is so important, the National Guard should be a participant in that war. They should go fight that war. But asking the National Guard or the military in general to do their job should not be secondary to Congress also doing theirs. I want to clarify a few things that were brought up today. There's 2 ways that the National Guard can be called into federal service. There's Title 32 and Title 10, and it's a very important distinction. Title 32 is for domestic and civil defense and national emergencies and the things that you think of traditionally the National Guard does, flood control, fires, storm damage, vaccine distribution, COVID relief, things like that. It's typically state controlled, but it's federally funded. And some examples of that would be like when the Michigan National Guard did COVID relief or assisted in the food banks or district health centers or local hospitals, things like that. Or when the California National Guard fights forest fires during the hot summers there, or when the Texas National Guard dealt with the Arctic blast just a few weeks ago. The second way that the National Guard is federalized is Title 10. And this is primarily used to call the National Guard into an armed conflict or war or humanitarian relief overseas, or even training outside of the United States. And in Title 10, there is an amendment called the Montgomery Amendment, which was accurately spoken about earlier, that says that the governors of the states cannot withhold their National Guard troops when they're called up to Title 10 orders for purposes of training outside of the United States. This amendment was added because in the 80s, Governor Perpich of Minnesota and Governor Dukakis of Massachusetts opposed Ronald Reagan's use of the National Guard to build roads in Honduras. They were sent there to train and build roads there because they couldn't train and build roads here in the country because the military should not compete with civilian contractors here. And so it wasn't right for the National Guard to build roads here. So they sent them to Honduras and they were building roads there. Perpich and Dukakis opposed that, saying that Reagan was going to use those roads for a massive military invasion in Central America. Well, the Supreme Court took this up and they said that that's not correct. The National Guard can be deployed for any purpose outside the United States for training without the approval of the governors. It's called the Perpich versus Department of Defense decision. And like the previous speaker said, the Supreme Court was very clear in their opinion on this. They said that it was for training, and they used the word training over and over again, and they left out combat and active duty combat intentionally because it's already been addressed in the Constitution under Article 1, Section 8, Clause 15, that states that the National Guard or the militia can be called into federal service for 3 purposes: to enforce the laws of the Union, to repel an invasion, and to put down an insurrection. And that first one, enforcing the laws of the Union, is what a declaration of war is. It becomes the law of the Union. And so that kind of clarifies how the National Guard can be federalized two different ways. Finally, in closing, I just want to bring up that the current authorization of use of military force that we're operating under in Afghanistan and Iraq and Yemen, Syria, all across Africa, the Philippines and Central America, this global war on terror, this authorization was signed in 2001. It was not a declaration of war. What it was a blank check that allowed the president, any president, to send the military anywhere for any amount of time, for any amount of money, for anybody that he or she deemed a threat to the United States. That's not the way the system is supposed to work. And since that time, 85% of the members of Congress that signed that authorization of use of military force are no longer in Congress. They've left, and they don't have to answer to it anymore. And the ones that are there now today, they don't have to answer for it either, because it's not their war. It's not their authorization that was signed. It's not them that said it was okay for the president to do this. The Defend the Guard bill is a way for the states to take back that control and say, listen, we have a federalist form of government. Our founding fathers had it right. And the power comes from the people through the states to the federal government. And so I would urge you, on behalf of the thousands and thousands of members of our organization, veterans who have served in all the conflicts, that have the literal skin in the game, to support HB 4058 that Representative Johnson has so boldly put before you today. And I would stand for any questions that you might have of me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. And to you and our previous speaker, thank you for your service. Are there any questions? None at this time. Thank you, Mr. McKnight. Really appreciate it. We also have Dave Dudenhofer. And
Hey,
Dave,
how are ya?
I know I butchered your last name. Could you kindly pronounce it correctly?
Yeah, it's Dudenhofer.
Okay. Well, thank you for testifying today. We're running short on time if you could.
Yeah, real short. I don't want to reiterate everything that the previous speaker spoke about. I wish I could be there with you today, but I'm at home playing dad with my new daughter. Her name is Paloma. And the point of me being on here today is I ran for Congress last year, and one of the things that I ran on was the government getting back to its basic foundational structures and their function, which is to adhere to the rule of law, our Constitution. Very simple stuff. And I've been an activist predominantly in Detroit, Wayne County, going back to 2007. I've come across so many people, whether it's Democrat, Republican, or nonpartisan. And one of the major issues they're all concerned about is how our troops are being abused and not being utilized properly according to the rule of law. So this, to me, is a no-brainer. And I think, when people mention how the National Guard may be abused for political purposes, I mean, nothing could be truer than what's going on in our nation's capital right now. So I think that we really need to just, understand that our future generation depends on people like you doing their part, doing their role. This is a very easy, no-brainer issue. This bill needs to be put forward, and we need to have this discussion because it's getting out of control. And really, what are we going to have for her future generation? What's going to be her future when representatives who represent her aren't, treating her generation the way that it should and abusing her generation by not following and not adhering to the rule of law. And so I just come to you with that. It's a little bit more of a human, simplistic, in the grassroots, so to speak, viewpoint on this issue. But I really think this is an easy one, and I support this. So I just wanted to pass that along, and thank you for the time.
Thank you, Dave, and thank you for bringing a special guest. Vice Chair Jones has a question.
Hey, Dave, not a question, just a statement. I have seen you before on dudeforcongress.com.
I'm sorry, say that again?
I said I seen you before at dudeforcongress.com.
Oh, yeah. Well, Dudenhofer, so Dude was very, very easy for people to remember, a little bit of marketing, but yeah, I ran for that, and I had a great experience. Like I said, I got to meet a lot of people, and one of the things that they were concerned with genuinely was their children and how their children who may choose to serve our nation were being utilized by their government. And when I talked about this issue, about the fact that we've sent our your children off into these wars, sometimes wars of aggression, without even so much as a declaration or following the rule of law, they didn't know about it. They didn't know how deep, that issue can go, and they were very concerned about it. And like I said, Republican, Democrat, didn't make any difference. That's why I support this, and that's why I wanted to take the time to come here today.
Seeing no further questions, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.